It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. I think I'm going to call this episode 230 and a half. This is a bonus show going up only a few days after the last show, and I'm not going to talk about finance. I'm not going to do an investing skeptically segment, and after the interview, you're just going to hear the exit music. I want this show to go up as quickly as possible, and I mean today. It is Sunday, October 1st. This is a bonus show. This is in addition to my other show, and I'm doing all this work on Sunday because something has come up that just cannot wait. I got contacted by David Tamayo, who is with the Hispanic American Humanists, and they are raising funds. They are collecting items, and they have a plane, and they're flying things to Puerto Rico. So I'm going to even make my intro short. Please listen to the interview, and please... I'm seriously asking you to go to the website, hafree.org. It's all explained in the interview here in a few minutes, but go donate some money. Go buy some things. There are people that have their lives that are at risk. And quite frankly, our government is not doing enough. So we need to step up and help people who are actual Americans living in the United States of America. Puerto Rico is part of the United States of America. Please listen to the interview and go donate some money. And hopefully in a few days, I have a normally kind of sort of scheduled show. So thanks for listening. With me now, I have David Tamayo. How are you, sir?
Fine. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And you are, I guess, are you the president of the Hispanic American Freethinkers?
I am the president and the founder of the organization also.
I thought so. And how long have you been doing that? Quite some time now.
Yeah, we started this in 2010 or so, and then we legalized it, 501c3, the whole bit, in 2011. And we've been going strong since. We're really the only Hispanic Latino organization in the United States that is 501c3 that is fighting for secular values. So I'm happy to say that I'd like to see more of those organizations. So if anyone hearing this, please form and let's work together and let's move forward.
I love it. And David, you and I have known each other, I don't know, quite a few years.
5 years maybe, I don't know, a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while. And
put it this way, not long enough.
Not long enough. And it's one of those things, of course, I'm sure you've experienced this. You're at a conference, you see somebody Friday night that you want to talk to, and either you or the other person says, I'm in the middle of something, let's talk later. And next thing you know, you're waving them off on Sunday afternoon because they've got to go catch their plane.
Yes. And I remember you and I had a chance to get a drink, I think was in Salt Lake City some years ago.
Yeah.
And that was, you and I had a good conversation then. And since then, well, we've worked together at Reason Rally, and well, you're all over the place. So
I try. Yeah, that's right. In case the listeners didn't know, you are also on the board of directors for the Reason Rally. And thank you for helping out there.
Thank you. It was great. It's still a lot of people see it as well. We didn't accomplish everything we wanted, but it's still the second largest gathering of atheists, agnostics, and nuns that we've ever had. The first one was in 2012, but being the second biggest is not too shabby.
No, it's quite an achievement, and I don't know if all the groups are going to come together for something else in the future, but I would recommend, and since I've got your ear, I'll bend it, that we have some kind of indoor conference.
Yes.
Because if you get just 3,000 people together inside of a giant convention hall, that would be an amazing amount of energy.
Absolutely. And not only that, it'd be a lot easier if it's hot, you can cool it off. If it's cold, you can warm it up. You have, greater control of everything. Being outside, it's sometimes, you're at the mercy of the weather. You remember the first one, we had, huge thunderstorms.
Right.
And the second one, it was getting hot and humid, and it was because it was done right there in the mall. You have a big swimming pool. Well, not swimming, I guess. Reflecting pool, right?
Yeah, reflecting pool, yes.
In the middle. And so, I think people are more split also. It was tough. I think it's a lot better to do it inside like a lot of other conventions are done.
Well, why don't you tell us all about the Hispanic American Freethinkers organization, and then we're going to go after that into a little bit of Puerto Rico, which is what inspired this whole thing. But let's talk about what you've been doing for years first.
Well, so the reason we formed this organization was because when I first started going to meetings and going to conferences and things like that, I looked around and there weren't a lot of Hispanics around. And I'm thinking, okay, well, Hispanics make up 17% of the U.S. population. Just for reference, African Americans are 12% of the population. And so when you look around, you don't see, when it comes to politics, when it comes to positions of power, like in corporations, CEOs, COOs, etc., you don't see a big crowd of Hispanics in there. And also, and so in the atheist community or in the secular community, I didn't see that either. And I figured, okay, well, I'm going to start a little local group. And we did. We started in the Washington, D.C. area. And when I say we, it was my wife and I started, just showing up to an Olive Garden, sitting there and calling for meetings and meet up. And no one would show up the first couple of months. And then after about 6 or 7 months, we had about a dozen people showing up. And one time we had one person coming in who sat in the back and, didn't say much. And we went around the table basically asking everybody how long they've been atheists or how long they've been secular, whatever. And this person who looked like a day laborer, he started saying that, all his life he never believed in anything. His whole family said that he was crazy and they treated him, as a heathen. It was really bad because he couldn't be a good person if he didn't believe in God or anything like that. And all of a sudden he started crying when he's telling this story, how, you've just validated everything that I've believed. All of you are very intelligent, very educated, and I feel that I'm not crazy and this is great. And so I thought, well, if we could only make, one or two more people feel the same way, so emotional about it, just knowing that someone is there, it'll be worth it. And so we formed the organization. And since then, we've had, a couple of dozen people who almost the same way. They've come and saying, oh, I thought I was the only one. Thank you so much. I didn't know that there were secular Hispanics out there, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, to me, it's worth it. We're an education organization, nonprofit. We do some programs in some local schools, high schools, especially teaching, doing seminars and teaching classes to high school kids on critical thinking skills. And so for me, it's always a great pleasure in trying to educate people, because I think what's going on in our country today here is nothing more than lack of education, and it's a lack of critical thinking. A lot of people, go with emotions. A lot of the people that voted in the elections voted through, by emotions, not really because they were informed, not because they actually knew what was going on. And so for me, it's been a great deal of pleasure. I'd love to pass on the torch to somebody else to be president of their organization. And but it's always, every time that I try to get rid of the position, I get other people saying, no, you got to stay, you got to stay. And so please, anyone interested in being president of Hispanic American Freethinkers, come and join us and show your leadership, and let's go on. Because, I don't want people to think or feel that this is David Tamayo's organization, that this is, and we have elections and we have, all the stuff that goes with a nonprofit. But because we are, a minority group, and a lot of the people that we service, or a lot of people that we try to help, are not very wealthy. We're always short on funds as it goes. But, we're 100% volunteers, so we can't complain too much.
Now, do you have meetups in different places or groups that meet in different cities, or is it still just in D.C.?
No, so what we did is we formed affiliated groups. We decided that rather than try to become like a huge organization that it tries to control each chapter or anything like that, instead of chapters, we decided to go with affiliations. And so, yeah, we have affiliated groups, and we encourage these groups to be independent and, to be just associated. So we're kind of the network that puts them all together. So we have Chicago Latino Atheist. We have in New Jersey the Hispanic American Atheist there. We have in Florida the Orlando Hispanic Skeptics. We have in Los Angeles, in San Diego, in different cities. So yeah, all over the country we have, in Puerto Rico, of course, also. So, and they all have different meetups. And the idea is that when people travel from one place to another, they have a place to visit where, there's a little bit more emphasis on culture, on the Hispanic culture and everything. Americans all, obviously, but the idea is that, because of the Hispanic culture, there are certain differences in how to approach religion, which is very much embedded into the culture, and how to approach family. And so fairly often we find ourselves giving people advice on how to deal with their family and friends when they come out as atheists or agnostics or whatever.
And what does someone do if they think they would be a member of this group, but they're not in one of those big cities? They're in small town America. How do they get help?
Most of our interaction is through the internet, and so we have a Facebook page. We have so if you look for Hispanic American Freethinkers in Facebook, pretty active page in there. We have our webpage, of course, halffree.org, and we also, and of course, I get a lot of email, private email, where people just want to talk and let go. And I got to tell you, it's worked out. We sometimes online have debates with preachers, because there are a lot of right now a lot of religions are going for the Hispanics. They see Catholics. So speaking as a former Catholics right. are typically not great at being Catholics. They go there, they stand up, sit down, go on their knees, cross themselves, But if you ask them a question, why do you do X? Or why can't a priest get married? Or, how long has it been that a priest can't get married? They're not going to know those things. And so that's where a lot of the other religions take advantage of, whether it's the Mormons, the Pentecostals, or even the Muslims. I mean, over 250,000 Hispanics over the last decade have converted into Islam in the United States. And that's scary, in my opinion, because sometimes, when people turn into a religion, it's like they're trying to make up for lost time. And sometimes they're more passionate than the people that actually were born and grew up in that environment.
Well, so, I agree with you. And I think that, from a demographic standpoint, a lot of religions are quite clever, and they see the writing on the wall, just like they have vacation Bible school and confirmation and all these programs to get 8, 10, 12, 15-year-old children into the church. They also see that more and more Hispanics are coming to the United States. They're having more kids than the Europeans, I guess. And
yes,
European
average, yeah.
And, they're not fools. These organizations are quite smart, and they want to go where the numbers are.
What's fun is that they use a lot of them. All of the religions tend to use the same tricks. For instance, they use free babysitting services.
Right.
And they use, so in human nature, when someone does something for you, you feel that you owe them. And now they say, well, can you just stay for services? We're not asking for much. You don't have to do anything. Just listen. And people feel, well, they're taking care of my kids. They're teaching me English classes. Oh, I can't, I have to do something. And since they don't have their resources, then they said, I'll just pay back with my presence. And when little by little, they start getting brainwashed. And if not them, their kids themselves. And so they become more susceptible to the indoctrination, and again, because they're already believers, they just have to twist them a little bit and say, no, it's the same God, except that your church, the Catholic Church, is teaching you the wrong thing, or they twist things like you're adoring Virgin Mary, and that's idolatry.
Yep.
Or there are figurines in the church, and that's idolatry. You shouldn't have any idols. And so the idea was the idea is that it's a lot easier to just change them a little bit than if you have to change them altogether, which I think is when we're atheists, that's what we're trying to, when we try to have these discussions with others, what we're looking for is sort of a total flip. And that's a lot more difficult because, it's a lot easier if you just have to change a few things. And so with the Hispanics in Latin America, it's about 68% are Catholic.
Right.
In the United States, it's only 51%. So the Catholic Church here loses more members than any other place in the world. Now, they also, because of immigration, they tend to replenish those numbers and have been for a long time. But all the other religions, like the Mormons and again, the Pentecostals, they've been replenishing and growing their numbers exactly because they, use this new crowd of people. And so I met these two Mormon girls that were trying to indoctrinate me. And again, I got a message in Facebook in Spanish one day saying, would you like to talk about and I said, all right, I'll bite. And so I put in the information there. And sure enough, in a couple of weeks, I got this phone call, met with these two young girls who were totally unprepared, of course. I was impressed how well they spoke Spanish, just fluently.
They weren't Hispanic.
No. One was from California, and the other one was from Utah, and they both spoke Spanish fluently. And but I couldn't get the accent. So I asked them. I said, "Well, so what country did you go to learn Spanish?" And they said, "Oh, we've never left the United States. We learned here in Falls Church, Virginia, in a place called Coolmore, which is like a Hispanic town." This very Hispanic community, and that's where they do their. They had recently opened a church in there, a Mormon church, and till this day, I get calls once in a while inviting me to go to services there. But it's incredible. So they are opening, a lot of these churches, and instead of going to another country, they do their proselytizing here internally in the country towards a Hispanic.
Well, it was interesting when I was in Italy. We went to a town on the Adriatic side, and we had a tour guide. We went through a package through a Rotary, and we had a tour guide that would translate stuff for us. And I could keep up with this a couple of years ago, some of the Italian, but when they started getting to specific topics and buildings and describing technical terms, I would get lost. And we were telling him about Mormons, and he had never met Mormons. And the very next day, when the tour was done, he went with my wife and I to go explore the little local town, and we ran into a pair of Mormons.
There you go.
But they were dressed up in very stylish clothes, not like you normally expect Mormons to wear. So they had adjusted to the local culture, and they were speaking pretty good Italian. And we talked to them for a little bit, and I asked them a few questions, and they gave straightforward, honest answers. And our tour guide was just floored that people would actually believe this stuff.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And it's a modern religion, so we know everything about that religion.
Well, and we just learned more. From what I understand, one of the offshoots of Mormonism, one of the smaller sects, the one that formed from Joseph Smith's son, had documents that were the original written texts, given to the printer to make the books. And it's different than what's in the Book of Mormon now. It's kind of comical.
It's modified, and of course, anytime they have to change their rules, like it was for polygamy or about racism, they, their prophet will get a phone call from God, and God will inform him that God has changed his mind, and that we now accept black people in the in the priesthood, or we now don't like polygamy. Etc. It's always very interesting, and that's a problem with the new religions, and yet they attract millions, and yet they convince people. I mean, look at Scientology and others. Jehovah's Witnesses is also a modern, and so the other religions, Islam or Christianity, etc. They have a much long, the time has obscured their history, and so they can pretend more things and they can claim more things without having to prove them.
Well, I love when I talk to a Christian that thinks Christianity has kind of existed forever.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, what do you think of that Jesus guy? What did he do for Christianity? Nothing. He wasn't even a Christian.
Exactly. It's just a Jew. And he was preaching to the Jews. Of course, again, I'm not taking sides, but assuming he existed.
Yeah. It's a fun thing. Now, just earlier today, actually, and I'd been thinking about this, what can I do, me, Phil Ferguson, to help out people in Puerto Rico? Because this, not to mock it or make fun of either Puerto Rico or religion, this may be a disaster of biblical proportions.
Exactly.
And
so
it seems like our government is not very excited about doing something.
Well, I remember at the beginning I said that ignorance is what's gotten us in a lot of trouble so far. A lot of people are ignorant about Puerto Rico. They don't know that every Puerto Rican is a U.S. citizen by birth. They don't know that Puerto Rico is American territory. It's part of the United States.
I even heard one politician seemed to be surprised and was explaining to the listeners that it's a what do they call it? An island, which means it has water all around it, and some of it's like ocean water, so it's really far away, hard to drive to.
It's incredible. What's sad though is that when Haiti had their earthquake some years ago, the United States was all over that island. Even though it's in the middle of the ocean with ocean water around it. Also, apparently we had ships then. I don't know what today, and so the idea. The problem with Puerto Rico right now is that not only it has gotten a little, it has gotten less help than other places have gotten, but also it's been slow and basically no one's in charge. And so there's lots and lots of things just sitting in the dock, lots of food, lots of things that are just sitting there doing nothing. And part of the problem is the extent of the damage, the extent of how many people are dying or what's going on. No one really can tell because there's no communication. So all cell towers got knocked down. Electricity right now, it's only really in San Juan in the capital. Not all of it, just pieces of it, but most of the country is without electricity. And so no electricity. Imagine hospitals dealing with heart attacks, dealing with everything. Medicines, without electricity, medicines go bad. Insulin goes bad. And so people that had insulin at home and, you have 30-day supply of insulin, for instance, well, that all goes bad and starts going bad when the temperature is, 80 to 95 degrees every day. And no cell phones to communicate, all the towers. I mean, imagine the power of the wind in order to knock down, metal towers and, knock down cement, telephone poles, etc. It's just incredible. And I've seen some photographs that are just amazing. I saw one today of a cow on top of a electric telephone pole kind of thing.
What?
On top. Yes. A cow that blew out, the wind blew it up there. And of course, now it's a dead cow.
I was going to say it must have gotten spiked because it can't balance up there in the wind.
Exactly. Oh yeah, it got spiked in there, and it's just hanging. Well, and it's entangled with the electric wires also.
Right. And
so there's a lot of flood water is still out there, and there are animals, lots and lots of animals that died, and there's just And so again, the problem is it's not so much right at the beginning. It's over the long run, is over the next 10, 20 days, 30 days with no sanitation, with no sewer,
when you start
running water.
When you start running out, when you have no fresh water, you have no food, you have very little medicine availability, and people start dying, and when those bodies aren't taken care of,
then you start seeing more and greater disease.
Yeah,
so the problem right now is that no one can get to the other cities or the towns. They've done helicopter drops of things, but again, the complaint has been, well, we only have 4 helicopters doing this. Now the island is 100 miles by 35 miles. It's almost like a rectangle, and but until a couple of days ago, no ship from any other country was allowed to go to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I just heard about
that. Because of a law. And so that law was finally suspended up after a lot of pressure was being put by both Republicans and Democrats. Because, this is a time, I got to say, this is a time where we can't care about religion or politics. This is the time when we need to care about these humans and these Americans that are there. And the infrastructure for electricity, for instance, was already kind of poor to start with because the whole island had been running a huge deficit. Again, because they couldn't, because they're not a state, they're not allowed to borrow, they're not allowed to do a lot of the things that states can do.
And there's all kinds of complications with that, which I'm sure maybe for another time we can talk about that for a long period of time. But what really just irks me is that is brought up as a problem or a condition maybe of getting the help. It shouldn't even be on the table. We just got to do whatever we got to do. We can spend hundreds of millions of dollars taking thousands of men and women to the other side of the planet to set up and prepare for war. And we can do food lines, and we can prepare meals, and we can have sanitation and medicine and doctors and medical camps. But we can't do that a few miles off the southern tip of Florida.
Exactly, and almost within swimming distance. No, not swimming distance, but certainly
pretty good swimmer.
Cruise ships go there all the time.
Well, they used to, yeah.
Yeah, well, and in fact, Royal Caribbean a couple of days ago went there and brought in a lot of food and a lot of stuff, and picked up also people that wanted to leave the island. I think it took a couple of thousand people off the island. So right now, one of the things that we're doing in Hispanic American Free Thinkers is, just to be clear, I am not Puerto Rican. I've been to Puerto Rico a few times, and we have a big secular movement over there because there's a lot of infringement between religion and politics over there. So we have a couple of groups there that are extremely active.
Wasn't there a joint conference with them and American Atheists a couple years ago?
Yes, I was. Yes, and I was at that conference, and we did. In there we had Humanistas Seculares de Puerto Rico. That's the Puerto Rican humanists.
I understood that. That's kind of scary.
So we did a conference there with American Atheists, and it was really good. We had a couple of hundred people show up, and so it was a good conference. We had Matt Dillahunty among many others that were speakers there, and so things were going well, and again, like in every other city, we're fighting for that. But at this point and at this moment, we're looking at this humanitarian catastrophe that is really coming loose in front of our own eyes. And the stuff that we decided, well, we're humanists above all. All of us are humanists, whether we call ourselves free thinkers, atheists, agnostics, whatever. Most of us are humanists. We want to help others. The reason we care, the reason we are activists is because we care about other people. And so one of the things that we know that they're going to be dealing with for the longest time is water, is electricity, and things like, cooking, and without electricity and gas, cooking and that kind of stuff, it becomes more. So we decided to get a few things that for people to donate, and we have people in Puerto Rico that we work with, and people that are on the ground, secular people, that will distribute this evenly. There are some churches right now. I know a few friends that belong to some churches where they will distribute only if you're a Christian or if you're for particular. We're going to be there to help out the people from our church first.
Yeah.
And to me, I mean, that's sad. It's really sad. Regardless of how we feel philosophically or even politically, the idea here is that above all, we need to help out these people many people that lost their entire homes, where there's just nothing, flattened. Some people say that this was like having a tornado, a 3-hour tornado. Instead of, most cities get a tornado for a few seconds, for a minute or two.
Yeah.
And this one, was for 3 hours. So,
well, and tornadoes tend to avoid, for whatever reason, large cities. This did not. It hit everybody.
No. It's sad because, it destroyed 98% of agriculture, livestock. It killed, 90% of all livestock. So horses, cows, all of that got killed. And of course, a lot of people lost their roofs, walls, things like that. And so some of the things we're concentrating on basically 6 things in collecting. We're collecting this thing called live straw, which is used in Africa and used in a lot of places. Is this straw where you can drink water, dirty water, and it'll filter out the water sort of in the form of a straw. And I think you can do a couple of 1,000 gallons for that. And so the idea with this is to try to prevent people from getting sick by drinking bad water.
So important.
The other thing is, we have these solar cookers, and solar chargers, because we know that the first thing that's going to come up are cell phones for communications. T-Mobile is there trying to set up, temporary towers, etc., so people can call in and report in. There are people. I know people here that have not heard from their relatives yet. They don't know if they're dead or alive because they can't reach them in any way, shape, or form. Now, imagine not being able to get in touch with your family for a couple of weeks, and after a catastrophe.
And again, how big is this island?
It's 100 miles by 35 miles.
So the most extreme is 100 miles. That's an hour and a half in a car.
Yes.
Well, that's an hour and a half in a car in Illinois.
But in Puerto Rico, a lot of the roads are down. A lot of bridges. They have mountains, and so a lot of landslides and things of the sort. And so the other thing so solar cookers, for instance, is a good thing, because one thing they get a lot of sunshine. So solar cookers are a thing, and solar chargers for charging phones and flashlights and things of the sort, which we're also providing LED lights, and then of course, in an emergency of any kind, what is the number one thing you want to have? Duct tape. Duct tape works for everything, and so we're sending a lot of duct tape also, and of course the tarps to cover the belongings that you may able to salvage, or to have a makeshift roof or whatever until you can get things done, because the sun beating up on you is also not a good thing, and rain and all that. So there are a lot of people that are unaccounted for at the moment, and by a lot I mean maybe 100,000 or more people that no one knows anything about them. Hopefully they're fine, but the fear is with the elderly. There were a lot of people that were, the elderly are more at risk, especially when it comes to food and when it comes to those things. Now, we're a nonprofit 501c3, as I mentioned, but there are a lot of people who say, yeah, but we don't know. We don't know you very well, or we don't trust you. We want to give to the Red Cross or something like that. I tell people, listen, Red Cross does a great job, but they have big overhead. I mean, their CEO, before a dime goes to a needy person, the CEO needs to get paid their $500,000. And oh, by the way, that's low, a low pay for a CEO. There are other CEOs in nonprofits that make a lot more than that.
Right.
In HAFRI, we're all 100% volunteer. The people that we have in Puerto Rico are 100% volunteers. And they do, we do what we do because we love people, and, we want to help out.
You threw out a phrase, HAFRI. What is that?
I'm sorry. HAFRI is the shortcut for Hispanic American Free Thinkers.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Yes. HAFREE. HAFRI.
I knew. I just want to make sure the listeners knew what you were referencing.
No, I appreciate it.
And so how can my listeners, I mean, I'm not a huge show, but maybe 10, 15,000 people listen. How can they help out?
Oh, I think a lot more than 15,000 listen to your show. But the best way is if they go to hafri.org. In there, you can click cash. You can donate cash, which also helps. And because then we can buy things in bulk and get a much better price. Or we have some links to Amazon where you can buy some of the things that I just mentioned, the live straw, your solar charger or solar cooker, that kind of stuff, and just have it shipped to our offices at Hispanic American Free Thinkers. And we have access to a couple of resources to take things over there. So we have one private plane, someone that we know that they've already done one trip and will do, they said, if you need to send a few things, I can take some things. And so our contact in Puerto Rico has a satellite phone, and that's how we can get in touch with them. And so satellite phones are the only way to communicate in there in Puerto Rico. So we know that this is for the long run. They said electricity, they're going to have to do the infrastructure from zero. So people are going to be without electricity for a minimum of, anywhere between 3 to 6 months and longer in many places. And so having some of these technologies and some of these things that are just basics to stay alive are great things. The things that I mentioned are things that you would take in a survival trip in the wilderness. They're not terribly expensive. They're very, like the live straw that gives a couple of thousand gallons of drinking water. It's only like $25. And so it's a lot, cheaper than buying bottles, for 1,000 gallons of bottled water. It's and water is a lot more expensive to ship than it is to ship some of these things that will allow people to clean their own water and drink some water without getting sick. So that's that. Now, if people say, well, I want to do another organization or whatever, in our website we recommend a couple of other organizations that we have no affiliation with, but we've checked them out and they have a good review. They spend little in overhead, and that's what we want. We want people to spend little. There's also we're currently in the process of making arrangements with another organization called the Mark Curry Family Foundation, and this is a multimillionaire guy that started this foundation a couple of years ago, and he lives in Puerto Rico himself, and so this is a wealthy guy, and so with him and his foundation, they also have people there and are already serving thousands and thousands of meals and preparing packages. So 100%, you want to make sure that 100% of the funds or nearly as much as 100% of the funds that you're donating are making it to the people that actually need it, not 60%, not 50%, which sometimes you see with the huge, big organizations. Now, I'm sure the U.S. government is going to do the right thing after they try everything else, as the old saying goes, and they will put in, they will give out the basics like water and food, but and eventually the Army Corps of Engineers, I'm sure, is going to help with some of the infrastructure. So for us, I think anything solar that we can give to them that works, that gives them independence from that infrastructure and allows them to survive, is critical. Again, there are other places that need it. We know that there's need throughout the world. In Puerto Rico, these American citizens are stuck there, and the problem is that it's not like we can drive there, or it's not as easy for us, simple people. For the governments, it's no big deal. It's the same thing. But I know here in Washington, D.C., we had firemen that went to Mexico, or that drove from here to Texas to help out in the floods in Texas. They can't do that, and they don't have that luxury in Puerto Rico. So we have to try to concentrate our aid there, because the need is going to be, and the destruction is so massive. I mean, massive.
So let me see if I can summarize all this to make sure I've got it right. And of course, the listeners, I want to make sure they have it right. They can go to HA, that's for Hispanic American Freethinkers, but HAFREE.org.
Correct.
And I just went there now while we're talking, and you made this as easy as possible because you changed your homepage. Right?
Yes.
Your front page talks about what you guys are doing. There's a button there if you just want to give cash. Yes. That's cool.
Which cash is always king.
Cash works great. And then there's down at the bottom is the other groups you mentioned. But I'm very excited about this, and listeners can do this. That you've got the 5 things picked here. You've got the life straw, you've got a solar charger, duct tape, solar cooker, and tarps. Yeah. You can go pick those. You can mix and match, as little as $20, $25, $40, or maybe you want to buy 10 life straws. And I went and pulled them up because I followed the link, and it says here that it can filter up to 1,000 liters of contaminated water. And I've seen these things in action. It can be really heavily contaminated water. Someone can stick this thing in a creek or something and drink through this straw and get a few liters of water a day, where right now maybe they can't, or they've got to drink something and they're going to get infected. So the listeners, you can actually go buy these things. And again, on the webpage, hafree.org is the address where you can order your shipment to go to. And you can directly,
at the bottom of our webpage you can send it to our address, 1900 Campus Commons Drive in Suite 100 in Reston, Virginia.
Yep, and you even have it right before the part with Amazon. So it's going to be easy for your listeners. You can do something that will directly save lives, because you've been probably thinking, what can I do to help? We have now just provided you the solution. No, I haven't. I'm just telling you on my show. But yes, other people did actual work. We're just talking about it, where you can go make this difference. You can ship it to them. And then you have someone that has a private plane.
Yes.
And they will fly this stuff because I heard most of the airports are open. They can fly in and deliver this, and you have people on the ground with a satellite phone that can coordinate all this, and 100% of whatever my listeners spend goes in the things that actually help people on the ground, really, literally in Puerto Rico.
Yes, and we get audited by the IRS, and we want to make sure that people feel confident that that this stuff is going to, like you said, is going to be saving lives directly. We wanted to make it as easy as possible and as effective as possible, because again, as I mentioned, some of the huge organizations, their overhead eats up a lot of that donation.
Right, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring up the stuff that you've done and the organization and the conference that you worked with American Atheist is to make sure the listeners understand you're not just some random dude that sent me an email that said, "Hey, Phil, can I come on your show and talk about this?" I know David. Yeah. We've known each other for years. I've seen the work that he's done. I know what he's been involved with. I'm very confident that anything the listeners can do to help you guys goes 100% to Puerto Rico. Anything else that we should know about this process?
Well, this is going to be going on for a while because the need is going to be there for a while. So, I'm hoping that we can get sort of an initial thing going. But if you want to say, hey, over the next 6 months, I want to donate one live straw or one solar charger or, one solar cooker or a tarp, anything, please do so. The need is going to be there for a while, and we're going to continue to try to help the people in Puerto Rico. Again, it's because they're so isolated and very difficult for them, and we're going to start seeing a huge catastrophe there if things don't change quickly.
I unfortunately have to agree with you, and I think we need to be doing more. And we can spend $1 billion on one bomber.
Yeah.
But we can't rebuild bridges in the continental United States, let alone go over to Puerto Rico. And like I said earlier, this idea that they're behind and they're in debt and they owe money. And how are we going to fix that? Who gives a shit how we're going to fix that? There's people's lives at risk that had nothing to do with it. Just some nice family that's scraping by, 2 walls of their house is gone, and they need a tarp to put over the other 2 walls so they can stay out of the rains that keep coming. It's that simple.
Yes.
We're just humans helping other humans. So listeners, please go to the hafree.org website, read the information that's there, click on the links, make sure you make a note of the address or send cash, do what you can to help. And David, maybe you can come back in a few weeks or a few months and tell us how it's going and give us some updates and maybe where us all together, collectively as humanists, have helped somebody out.
Absolutely. And there are a few, we had a few days ago a meeting of different secular groups to try to work together. And I got to tell you, we're all working together. So let's help out. And if anyone has any questions, I'm more than open. You can find me on Facebook, and I always respond to emails. And so if you contact me privately there, or you can send me an email at dtamayo@hafree.org, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions, concerns, or anything that you want. And if you want to, volunteer to help collect some of these things, even better.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure everybody understands it's David, David. I know, it's easy. Yes. And Tamayo is Tamayo.
Yes.
Right? So I know that I have not only the smartest listeners of virtually any podcast because of the wonderful material that we cover, but I also have incredibly generous listeners. So once again, I'm going to ask the listeners, this is a chance, even if it's just $25. And I have people all the time asking me, Phil, what is your Patreon? I want to give $2, $5, $10 a month. Don't give me any money. I'm okay. I'm worried about people in Puerto Rico. So whatever you thought you might want to give me to support my podcast, I'm fine. I can support the podcast. Go to hafree.org and give some damn money. People's lives are at stake here. So, David, thank you so much for all this work that you're doing, and I appreciate you being on the show, and hopefully my listeners can be involved and make a difference.
Oh, thank you for having me in the show. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to the help that the listeners are going to provide. And I have to admit, I feel a little bit like in a church asking for money, but sometimes if you don't ask, you don't get, right?
I was going for PBS. I just
we're not making any heavenly promises, right?
Right, and I can't give any tote bags, so
that you can't, promises that you can't keep.
That's right. But it's just fascinating to me that with $25 and all the people that are volunteering, someone who's listening could make this small effort. I mean, talking about 2 or 3 minutes of time and $25. I mean, if you don't have any money, fine. I'm not talking to you. Don't donate. Yeah.
And it's tax deductible. You know, for those of you that pay taxes.
Yeah, but I know I have some listeners that have serious money. Yeah. Go buy a dozen of these things and send them to David, and he's going to put them on a plane, and they're going to go to Puerto Rico, and they're going to physically, literally, in reality, help individual people stay alive. So I'm very excited about this. And David, thank you so much for taking this time and the work that you've done. And I appreciate you being on The Phil Ferguson Show.
Thank you, Phil.